Today I want to share with you guys 10 prisoners who I was locked up with who are definitely the most memorable people that I served time with, guys that I will never forget. In some cases, some of the craziest prisoners that I served time with, or at least their story was that. When I think back to the time that I served and who I served that time with, you know, these are definitely 10 people who will always stick out. Does their story serve any type of a bigger purpose in my life? I don't think that it necessarily does. Does their story motivate me to not want to go down a route, or would it motivate somebody else? I mean, I don't think anybody would want to be in a situation that a lot of these people that I'm getting ready to mention were and still are in. So there's all of that. When you serve time, you're guaranteed to meet people that you'll never forget. You'll see celebrities and dudes who have high-profile cases, and, you know, just saying this right here, I think to myself that, you know, I could do this 10 prisoners I would never forget 10 times over, because there's hundreds of guys like this. And it's sad that, you know, people end up in these situations. They do the things that they do. People are crazy. There are some messed up people in this world. You're seeing it every day on the news these days, and it's always been like that. Is it getting worse? Kind of seems that way. I'm going to stop before I go too far into left field with all of that. I want to go ahead and get into this video. I don't want to make this thing extremely long. I'm going to try to change up the way I'm talking about that as well. But beginning this, I want to start with probably one of the most high-profile prisoners I was ever locked up with. Talked about this guy many times here on After Prison Show. His story is absolutely insane. And who I'm talking about is Malvo. Malvo was one half of the DC snipers who terrorized the northeastern part of the country back in 2002. I'll never forget that. I think it was October of 2002. I was just getting locked up for a robbery charge. I was smoking the crack rocks pretty heavily back during that time. I would end up beating the robbery charge down to simple assault, petty larceny, which I didn't even assault anybody in the case. I was a crackhead for a short period of time in my life. Sad to say, but it was the truth. I'm real enough to admit that. And I beat somebody, not physically, but I did beat their pockets. I said, hey, I'll get that. I'll be right back. And they called the police on me. This was a drug dispute, and they got me a robbery charge. Neither here nor there. I ended up getting locked up for that situation. And while locked up, right at the beginning, like within the first week, I think it was the first day or 2 days, something along those lines, it was huge news because this DC sniper situation had been taking place for, I think, 2 months prior. But within the first day or two of me getting locked up, these dudes got arrested, sleeping in a car at a rest stop. And when they searched the vehicle, they found the sniper rifle in the trunk, a hole in the keyhole of the trunk. Crazy situation. Muhammad, the older stepfather to Malvo, has already since long been executed. You know, again, this takes place up in the northeastern part of the country. Well, it don't got nothing to do with Norfolk City Jail, where I'm locked up when they get apprehended, which they get apprehended far, far away from there. And then Chesapeake City Jail, where I would end up getting transferred to for a probation violation, and it would be there where Malvo would end up going to trial at. They had to change of venue because they felt like they would have at least a better chance in the court proceeding if they had at least that. When you feel like the area may be biased against you, you can request for a change of venue. These dudes were national news, super high profile. No change of venue was going to matter at all. I was in Chesapeake City Jail, and during this time, we knew that Malvo was getting transferred to the jail because that's where his court was going to be taking place at. That had been in the news, and we kept getting locked down sporadically, and it was during one of those sporadic lockdowns that Malvo was, in fact, transferred into the jail. I was on trustee at the time. I had a friend who was in isolation at the time. He was in the hole. The trustee cell block in the hole was only separated by a gym, and there was huge plexiglass windows on either side of that gym. And it was in that isolation cell block where Malvo was housed at. And, you know, through the sally port doors that led into the trustee cell block, we would see Malvo getting transported back and forth to court. Every time there was a movement involving this young kid, because that's what he was a kid. I think he was like 17, maybe 18. I can't remember how old Malvo was during this time, but I know that he was young. Every time that he got transported to or from court, The jail was locked down, and it would be the highest ranking officials who would be transporting Malvo to and from court, and they would not even let this dude walk. They had him shackled and chained to a wheelchair. One of the craziest damn things that I ever saw. I mean, they considered this dude like Hannibal Lecter. I was working in the kitchen during this time. No inmates, no prison workers were allowed to touch the trays for him. Guards had to make his food because, I've mentioned this just recently, they thought that we would poison him. And another crazy thing that I'll never forget about this dude is during his trial, FX, the TV channel, played a movie. It was called 23 Days of Terror, 60 Days of Terror, something like that. A movie about the DC snipers. They were going to trial at this exact time. You want to talk about, like, you know, because they got a jury, and a jury's not supposed to have access to no newspapers or no news or something like that. I don't even know how you would prevent them from doing that. Can you imagine how many jurors were probably watching that movie during his trial? This dude was dead to rights. I hate to use that analogy right there, but he was, far beyond any movie about him. And he would end up getting life. Muhammad would end up getting the death penalty. There's talks about maybe Malvo could make parole. I've heard mention of that. And I had a friend of mine who was in isolation during the time with Malvo. He used to talk to Malvo between cells. And I guess Malvo was very artistic. He used to draw pictures. In fact, here's some of the artwork right here. I forgot that I ran across plenty of that on the internet. And one of the things that he used to draw quite a bit was like guards who worked in the jail who he didn't like with bullseyes on their heads. Crazy, crazy situation. Just as high profile and probably just as crazy, moving on to the next person. It's not a person, it's a group of people. I've mentioned them. Probably one of the first prison stories that I ever told at that. The Somalian pirates. Back in 2008, 2009, 2010, while I was in the jail, I would leave in 2010 from the jail to go to prison. I wasn't locked up with just one set of Somalian pirates. I was locked up with two. And I'll never forget when they brought the first set in, they moved all of the prisoners in our cell block. I was in a medium custody cell block in Western Tidewater Regional Jail. It was 2009, I'm pretty sure it was. They moved all of us to the top tier. They emptied every cell on the bottom tier. We had no idea why. One day they came in, they said, lockdown. We went to our cells, and all of a sudden came in about 5 banged up African dudes. Young, never forget that. One, maybe a few were on crutches. One was missing a leg. One was missing skin off of his face. These dudes looked like they had been in a fire. I had no idea. Well, actually, I'm pretty sure that I did know that these were the Somalian pirates because this had been on the news. Back during this time, the military would capture these dudes out there in international waters where there is no piracy charge or something along them lines, or maybe the piracy charge isn't as severe as it is in the United States. Well, they would capture these dudes and bring them back to the U.S. to try them, where I've heard it said, I don't know how true it is, that piracy here in the United States carries a life sentence. When these dudes came in, they locked them down. We were allowed to come out. And of course, prisoners were at their cells trying to talk to these dudes, and they didn't speak English. I believe they spoke like French and Somalian, whatever that language is. I'm not making any jokes. I just legitimately don't know. We had one prisoner in the cell block who spoke French. We opened up a line of communication with these dudes. One thing that I would also realize about these guys, they didn't like white people. I think I was the only white person in the cell block, and they were very standoffish of me. I was scared to death of them, thought they might try to kill me. But eventually, we would have, without even being able to speak to each other, some sort of like a mutual respect. They saw me as an outsider. They had to have, because that's what I was. And they would quickly realize that everybody in the cell block, probably except for me and maybe one other, maybe two others, I don't know, were not to be trusted, because they did trust some guy and started showing him their paperwork. And then some of their paperwork from their case came up missing. These dudes were ready to go to war. They were talking very angrily in their native language. And, these dudes were laughing about that. Messed up situation. How these dudes ended up getting blown up, that was another crazy situation. They were out there doing their pirate thing, riding in their little pirate boat, and ran across a ship that they didn't realize was a Navy ship. It was a Navy frigate, I believe, and they rode up and shot at it with an AK-47. All of a sudden, over the side of that ship came a whole bunch of guns pointed in their direction. They realized they just effed up in a major way. They took off, and I don't remember if it was a helicopter, but it was some sort of something that fired a missile at them, blew them up. Some of them got killed, and also part the reason why these dudes came in missing body parts. And that's how they got locked up. The other ones, I can't remember what they did. I know I've shared it before here on After Prison Show. I would be in another cell block with another set of Somalian pirates. And these dudes were young, just like the other set, and just as crazy. I'll never forget from that set, being out in the gym, the little rec area at this jail. These dudes used to run around, run laps with no shoes on. Their feet were this damn long. And, you know, not to make fun or anything, but these dudes were just real skinny, but real solid in terms of like, yo, it was going to take a lot to fight one of these dudes and to come out winning. Their endurance was probably hellacious, considering where they come from and what they've probably been through in their lives. They were also Muslim, and they took that very seriously. They didn't wear shoes inside of their cell. And they got to arguing with one dude who I absolutely couldn't stand, and I wish they would have killed this dude, just to be honest with you. He was a snitch POS for sure. And he was a young kid. His name was G. I actually did some tattoo work on this POS. Tattooed "Go Hard or Go Home" on this dude. He's not even in this video except for this one part of this. And he was arguing with these dudes and he spit in their cell on their floor. And oh my God, I was like, Lord, you have answered my prayers. It is about to go down for whatever reason. It didn't, but I was sure hoping that it would. Absolute disrespectful little bastard that G was. Changing the tone of all of this, let's go ahead and move on to number 3 on this list. Can't do this without Peaches. You know, there's a lot of high-profile people who I've introduced you to via stories here on After Prison Show, and hands down, Peaches definitely has to be one of them. There'll be a few, maybe one more, 2 more in this video like Peaches in terms of the popularity through prison stories. But Peaches is just one of them dudes that you'll never be able to forget. How could you? The dude was huge. He was like 6'7". Dude was big, like, you know, a linebacker type of big. Homosexual, and nothing wrong with that, but you definitely weren't gonna try to make fun of this dude for nothing. You know, because he was trained to go and he would mess you up. He damn near beat up somebody who's been a guest here on After Prison Show in the past. You know, a big guest here on After Prison Show. A guy that I shared a cut with, I had to share living space with Peaches. Ain't nothing like waking up to the scent of frankincense, almost like Frankenstein, some sort of prayer oil that they sell on commissary that dudes will use for either cologne or perfume. Watching Peaches dancing to Beyonce, putting on his tattoo ink eyeliner, his Skittle or M&M lip gloss, and that god-awful stench of the frankincense. And you ain't gonna tell Peaches nothing about how he's living his life or doing his time, and by living his life, I mean, you know, waking up early in prison and blasting some music that you don't want to hear because you're trying to sleep. Peaches is gonna do him regardless, and ain't nobody gonna tell him no different, or he's gonna show you something. And I'm really not talking about a penis when I say that, though there is that possibility. I'm talking about show you that ass whooping. Oh, Peaches. You know, just as crazy, unforgettable, memorable, mesmerizing as Peaches was the company that he kept, some of the dudes that he dated. Peaches wasn't looking for any type of long-term commitments neither. You know, one of his lovers was like this Skeletor-looking, super old, dark skin, cruddy, super skinny dude. I can't remember his name, and this dude was just as crazy. I thought that was the one for Peaches. I really thought that, you know, he was going to settle down, but, you know, Peaches is a rolling stone, and where he lays his hat is his home. One day I came back from work and I realized that Peaches had left his orange toboggan, his orange beanie on my pillow. And I said, hey, Peaches, I think you dropped this. I wonder if he was trying to tell me something with that. Number 4 on this list is somebody I've referred to here in the past as Bad Santa. Dude was an older white guy. I met him in the jail. I can't remember. It was one of many different times that I had been in the jail. I was in Chesapeake City Jail. I was in maximum custody because I always started out in maximum. Red band, as a matter of fact. Just because of the fact, I guess I had a horrible jail record. Just crazy. I didn't even have anything violent, but you always put me in there with the murderers. It was just wild how that worked out. During one of those times, I would be locked up with an older white guy who looked just like Santa Claus. If you didn't know what his charges were, you would have thought every Christmas that guy was playing Santa in the mall. However, I ain't talking no Billy Bob Thornton when I talk about a bad Santa. This dude was a monster. He would end up pleading in terms of his case. I mean, I think he pled guilty, but he had an excuse, and it was a crime of passion. Now, I had never been locked up with anybody who had tried to use that as their defense of crime of passion, but the dude's case was horrendous. He would end up getting sentenced to, I believe, gosh almighty, multiple life sentences plus some, but he definitely deserved this time. He was in a lover's dispute with his ex-wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, if I can remember correctly. Don't remember what the dispute was about, maybe the divorce, maybe the other guy, and I'm not making any jokes when I say this. This guy took this to the extreme, went to her work one night. She worked at a wholesale store, BJ's, went in there with a shotgun, shot the wife. Prior to walking into the store, he had shot her sister-in-law who was there to pick her up in the face with this shotgun. And in the store, he had shot at the wife who had put her hands up in self-defense. He blew off one of her hands or something, blew off some fingers, something along those lines. It was rumored, and this rumor was started by the guards who said that the police who arrived on the scene, when they saw the sister-in-law in the van, they were throwing up on the scene because it was just so heinous. This guy gets locked up and he carries on his daily life in jail like it's just another day. He had money. I remember every Sunday they served chicken. They served some kind of baked chicken. It was the boss tray of the week. And one week this guy went and bought everybody's chicken tray because they had just started selling cherry pies on commissary. You know those little dollar cherry pies that they sell at 7-Eleven? They just started selling those on commissary. Those were all the rave. This dude went and bought like 50 or 100 of those cherry pies, bought up all of the chicken trays that he could. I don't think he bought every chicken tray. You're talking about 100 people in the cell block, but he bought a lot of them and literally had stacks and stacks of chicken trays right there at the table. And he was just throwing these chicken trays away, just doing this shit out of spite. Like, I can't believe nobody took anything from him, but you got the guard stationed right there in the cell block. Everybody knew his case, so they probably thought, this dude ain't got shit to lose. And in a jail where shanks probably aren't too common, he probably had one if anybody did. And I'll never forget also about this guy, when he got sentenced, he was going to court. We're seeing this on the news. He's in our cell block. The guard had both TVs in the cell block, which are usually one on SportsCenter, one on BET, one on CMT, one on BET, one on MTV, one on BET. Like, he had both of the TVs on the news when they, announced what this guy had gotten sentenced to, like 8 life sentences plus 8 years or something like that. And the guard was clapping. There were a lot of people who were actually cheering, as a matter of fact. Very crazy. I will never forget that dude. I wonder if he's even still alive. I ought to try to look him up. Not that I would want to feature him or anything, but I'd just be curious to see if he's still living. Number 5 on this list is somebody who was a big hit in a prison story that I'd shared many moons ago, and that was Punk Tattoo Guy. How could I ever forget this guy? It was the first interaction that I had with a homosexual while locked up, a gay dude, who liked me like that. Now, he never tried to push up on me while in the jail or anything like that. He was a lot smaller than I was. We used to work out together with our shirts off, and it was during that time like we became friends. I didn't even know the dude was gay, and if I did, I still wouldn't have cared. He was a cool guy. But Punk Tattoo Guy had this tattoo on his chest. It looked like the smiley face from Nirvana, and it said punk underneath of it. And I asked him about that because punk is a slang word and a derogatory term for people who are gay while locked up. But he told me he liked punk music. That was the excuse for that. He worked at 96X. That was a local punk radio station. I thought that was super cool. Hey, Joe was trying to be a rapper. You never know. We became fast friends. He had all sorts of books and magazines. He let me use those and read those anytime that I wanted. Dude would just give me chicken trays on Sunday. I thought I had the best friend in the world. I didn't realize, I guess hindsight's all that, that dudes were probably snickering under their breath and like, oh, look at that little couple right there, but I didn't know. Dude used to sit next to me on my bunk, and I don't say that to be funny. I'm just, remembering how this situation used to go down. Well, I would end up getting in a fight with somebody who's also mentioned in this video. I would end up in isolation. Punk Tattoo Guy had gone home. You're always sad when a good friend of yours goes home. You want to go home. You don't want them to go home. Not really. I mean, of course you do, but you're going to miss your friend. I'm in isolation. I'm super lonely. All of a sudden, out of the blue, I get some mail, and I was never getting any mail. It was a letter from Punk Tattoo Guy. He told me in the letter that, you know, he wasn't necessarily straight. He wasn't any sort of flaming fairy. I'll never forget that, the way that he worded this. And he said he didn't know if I had known that or not. He sent me a $15 money order, and I was like, yo, I got me a friend for real on the outside. I was a little uncomfortable and caught off guard with the mention of the things that he did mention in that letter, but it wasn't like he was, professing his love for me. I don't think that he was. If he was, I didn't pick it up. I said, hey man, no issue with what you do. Thanks for the $15. I still think you're an awesome guy. Hey, could you look up my ex-girlfriend for me? I didn't hear back from Punk Tattoo Guy. I would end up getting moved out of isolation. I would go down to the old side of the jail, which is very small. You're in the 87 or the Landing. Those are, just where they have very small cell blocks. The Landing is the worst. The 87, it's just as bad. They call it the dungeon down there, regardless which section you're on, the 87 or the Landing. I would get a visit out of the blue. Oh my God, I was so ecstatic to go out there to that visit. Somebody else would go out to visit with me. I'm thinking it's that girlfriend. Punk Tattoo Guy came through in the clutch. He reached out to her. She's ready to come profess her love to me. I sit down out there and I am blown away when I see Punk Tattoo Guy sit down on the opposite side of that plexiglass with a shirt tighter than the one that I'm wearing right now, all black, looking like a Lance Armstrong windproof bicycle leotard. I'm like, yo, what the beep? Yo, what you getting ready for the Tour de France? Why are you here? You know how bad this looks? Yo, tell me you brought her with you. I don't even want to look you in your eyes. This is so uncomfortable. It was. I was young. I reacted to this situation probably in the worst type of way, and we spent the entire time talking about ex-girlfriends. Never heard from Punk Tattoo Guy again, and also never heard the end of that when I went back to the housing unit. Yo, Joe, who was that? And don't try to say that was your brother neither. There's not many people in this video who stand a chance of being not locked up at this point. Punk Tattoo Guy is one. Peaches is the other one. I think everybody else is still locked up. And I wonder where both of those folks are in this world. And I hope that wherever they are, they're doing really well. Number 6 on this list, and I hate that this is going to be one of those things that cause you to say, Joe, what the beep? You said these are people that you're never going to forget, but number 6 on this list is a dude that I can't remember his name. I've probably said it in the past if I've mentioned this dude, which I think that I have. But he's so important in terms of somebody that I'll never forget. I thought, because I came up with this video idea and I've thought about this for a long time, I just can't remember the dude's name. I met this guy when I was down in the old side of the jail at Chesapeake City Jail. A lot of these people I met in Chesapeake City Jail. It's pretty crazy. But I knew this dude without knowing this guy. I had heard stories about him back in the day when I was like 18 years old and I was selling my little OZs of the devil's lettuce, which is about to be legal here in my state. I ought to do a reaction video to that. Damn, OZs were $65 back then. Crazy. Now they're like what, like 400 maybe? This dude was supposed to be the plug's plug. He was the man. Gosh almighty, it's like his name is like on the tip of my tongue and I just can't think of it to save my life. I meet this guy. I'm blown away by this guy. Oh my God, like almost ready to get this dude's autograph. Like you are the envy of my young thug life. Like I want to be just like you. Had the cool car, had the cool girls. Like you were the man out there. Locked up, telling me all sorts of cool stories. I'm just like, kicking my feet up, hands under my chin. Like this is like camp. This is summer camp to me, and I found my idol. I found who I want to be when I grow up. I want to be this guy. Crazy enough about this dude, I would end up getting moved to another cell block, and I would hear all sorts of bad shit about this dude. Yo, he was a snitch. He was a rat. He wore a wire. He tried to get a dude on an attempted capital murder charge. Like, this was from another plug. Remember, that guy was the plug's plug. Well, this was one of the guys that he used to deal with. And I was just as blown away by this guy because he was somebody that I didn't know, but I knew of. And he was telling me a lot of bad stuff about this guy. Now, I would end up going home. I had exchanged information with dude, the plug, and I'm living with my father, and I'll never forget when I came home, I get a collect call from this dude. I answer the phone, and he's like, hey man, you trying to get back on? I got something for you. You can go pick it up. Yeah, I got something for you. It's like 20 pounds. You want to go get that? As tempted as I was to go get this, and I mean, if you think I'm dumb now, you should have seen me at 18. I'm like, yo, 20 pounds? That's like $1 million in my young, dumb mind. But thank God, even at such a dumb, young age, I was able to smell out what was pretty much, probably, in all likelihood, a setup. So when this dude is telling me this, yo, are you gonna go pick it up? Do you want it? Can I count on you? I had to have a come to Jesus moment right then and there and say, Joe, you better do the right damn thing right here. And I said, yo, plug, I'm gonna do the church thing. I've turned over a new leaf and I'm no longer interested in any of that. I want to be a law-abiding citizen and lose my number, basically. He would call me back and I would, never answer the phone for that dude again. But that was a crazy situation. Even more crazy than that. It could have been legit, right? But even more crazy than that would be a couple of years later, well, many years later, I would be in prison this very last time and I would read a news article. And it was about that guy in his nice, cool car out in some bad area of another city, and he had gotten killed. And I don't know if he got killed in a drug deal gone bad. I don't know if he went back to his old ways. I don't know if he was out there trying to help people. I figure that last one is probably a far fetch. I don't know if he got killed because they knew that he was a snitch, but I do know that he got killed. Crazy. Number 7 on this list, Delicious. I've mentioned this guy, a guy named Delicious. That's just so crazy. I've mentioned this guy a few times here on After Prison Show. I'll never forget this dude. This guy taught me a lot about just how to coexist with folks who are different than you, totally different than you. I'll never forget when Delicious first came into the cell block. I'm in the jail. I'm in Western Tidewater Regional Jail, getting ready to go to prison for my 7 years or to finish the 5 that I had left after the 2 in the jail. And I get a new cellie. All of a sudden, this big linebacker black dude comes up in the cell block, and this dude is walking like Beyonce, like he got some heels on. You ever seen a dude walk like they got some stilettos on in some Bob Barker shower shoes? That was verbatim how Delicious walked. And all of the snickering and crazy comments followed right thereafter. Damn, Joe, you got you a new cellie. Hey, what's her name, though? That your girl, Joe? Damn, you ain't tell me your wife got locked. Like, it was crazy. I didn't want to go into the cell. I didn't go into the cell till they locked us down. And the first thing that I said when I went in there was, hey, look, you big dude who could probably bench press and destroy me in here, then have your way. Ugh. I'm not, hey, look, I got no issue with you or anything like that. I said, I'm just not with it. You know what I mean? And I'll never forget Delicious's words to me. He said, you good. You Gucci. Well, thank you. Because I don't even like white boys like that. Oh my God, thank you. We would actually become very comfortable with each other. I would work out with my shirt off. Delicious would make little snide comments. Damn, Joe, you looking all right with that shirt off? Am I though, for real? Can you see me getting bigger? It's working? How about with these push-ups though? It was an interesting dynamic. Even more interesting was who took a liking to Delicious, the alpha male of the cell block, the block bully, this guy that I couldn't stand. Always used to catch this guy in my cell with Delicious. Oh, hey, what you doing there, Joe? I live here. Ew, what are y'all doing? Take that shit out to your cell. Delicious was a good dude. Had a Fed charge, can't remember what he was locked up for, but all I remember is, that was the first time that I had a gay dude as a cell partner. And when I left to go to prison, I left him everything. Number 8 on this list, talked about him, even wrote my first short story about him. One of the weirdest dudes I was ever locked up with, you guessed it, Coffee Man. Coffee Man was a bald-headed coffee addict. The addictive mentality, the addictive personality of this dude was so evident by the fact that this dude would do virtually anything for a cup of coffee. He was a hustler. He never went without a cup of coffee. He rarely would have to ask you for a cup of coffee. But he would, don't get me wrong, he would definitely ask you. I mean, that's just a part of that. But he would wash your clothes, wash your dishes, he would clean your cut area. This dude would do anything. And he had a decent hustle and, he stayed with coffee for the most part. One of the most memorable things about Coffee Man, I've got a cartoon of him right here. I drew this. I drew a bunch of other cartoons about Coffee Man, and I said I even wrote a short story about this guy as well. Get to that in just a second. But another memorable thing about this dude was the dinginess of his white t-shirt. This thing was like just so piss-stained yellow. And I don't want to say that's not because he didn't keep it clean, but I think he drank so much coffee that this shit used to like seep through his pores. And he just had like these horrendous yellow stains, especially from his armpit areas, on down. Coffee Man rarely slept. He would be up early every morning drinking his coffee, and he hung out with a motley crew, I think is a good way to word that. There was Serial Killer, there was Ernie, there was Johnny the Panty Bandit. That was Coffee Man's clique right there. This one day I got bored and I said, let's do something. I was making a lot of money with my prison picture hustle. I challenged Coffee Man to a challenge. I said, hey, look, I bet you can't drink a whole bag of coffee in 1 hour. And if you do it, I will give you 2 bags of coffee. Everybody tried to warn Coffee Man not to do it. Coffee Man did it. And man, this thing became it was like a football game. Everybody was tuned in the cell block watching this. Coffee Man did this. He did it with a little bit of time to spare. And ended up vomiting out of both ends of his body right afterwards, vehemently, violently. But he earned those 2 bags of coffee, and I gave it to him. Sadly enough, Coffee Man would end up getting locked up in another state. I think it was like down in Alabama, maybe Mississippi, for a robbery charge or a couple of robbery charges. Don't know what he was even doing down there. Maybe he went down there to start over. Maybe he had family down there. I don't necessarily know. But I know he ended up with a boatload of time, 20, 15, something like that, years to serve. Very sad that it didn't work out for Coffee Man and that he would find himself locked up again. But to be honest with you, and I hate the way that this is going to sound, I didn't have a lot of faith that Coffee Man was going to amount to much out here in the free world, given that his coffee addiction was so bad that it probably spoke to his addictive nature with other things also. There's only 2 more things on this list. Let's go through these super quick. And the first one would be a dude that I absolutely despised. I hated this dude, and I never even really saw him. I was just housed in isolation in close proximity to this dude. I ended up going to the hole. I believe it was in relation to me getting told on for tattooing. I had just spoke on that recently. Well, when I got sent down to isolation, I would be down there with a bunch of other knuckleheads. And this one dude who just laughed and carried on like everything was great. Now, I wouldn't know it at the time, but this guy wasn't in isolation for disciplinary reasons. He was in isolation under protective custody, basically. He was in a red jumpsuit because he could not go out into population. This guy's name or nickname was, I think, Sleepy, if I can remember correctly. But his real name was James Boughton Jr., who at 23 years old was sentenced to 38 years in prison and 6 months for first-degree murder and malicious wounding and a bunch of other charges because he shot and killed a Mormon kid, one of 2 Mormon kids, and I think he shot the other kid, and maybe the other kid lived. Something along those lines. These 2 Mormon kids were from out of state. They were here on on their Mormon missionary. They were in a pretty not so great area of Chesapeake when they came across a fight. Now these kids, unbeknownst to like any codes of the street or anything like that, because they ain't from here. They were from like Ohio or somewhere Midwest AF, where, they've never experienced anything like what you can experience in some other areas. They didn't know that, if 2 people are fighting or if there's a group of people fighting, that you don't even get involved in this. These kids tried to break up this fight. In the process of them trying to break up this fight, this James Boughton Jr. killed one of these kids in cold blood, and I think shot and maimed the other one. And again, back in isolation, laughing and carrying on like everything was great. I hated this dude. And I found out what he was locked up for while I was back there in isolation. And of course, I wanted to do something to the dude. I didn't have a lot of time left. I wasn't willing to risk, years of my life trying to do some vigilante justice. It's just being real with you. Should I have? Some people would say, oh yeah, I definitely would have done that. Well, when you're in that situation, you might think a little bit differently. I hate the fact that this dude didn't get life. And the family of the victim, they were satisfied with the outcome of this. I read that. And I just don't think that it was right at all. I think it was really a messed up situation. I think that this dude, James Boughton Jr., he was also a snitch as well. And I think he snitched on another high-profile dude who I wasn't locked up with, but who I knew about. I mean, he was locked up during the same time as me. I just never met him until I came home from prison. And that's Ryan Frederick. We featured him on After Prison Show, and he was facing the death penalty for a capital murder charge. Killed a detective. Very crazy story with all of that. This guy, Sleepy James Boughton Jr., would end up going to court testifying against Ryan Frederick, and they had never even been housed together because this guy was in isolation the entire time. Now, even though Ryan Frederick was as well, I don't know, maybe they were somewhere near each other. I can't remember. I remember something about this, how when this took place, Pat Robinson, who does 700 Club, and he's got Regent University, right here in Virginia Beach, they do CBN, Christian Broadcast Network, right here from Virginia Beach. Pat Robinson, they got a private jet for CBN, flew that plane to Ohio or wherever to pick up that family of, these kids and bring them back here, during all of this. Just an unbelievably crazy situation. And this guy, one of the people that I hated the most for what they had done. These young kids, they didn't deserve that shit. They didn't know no better. They should have known better. It is what it is. Let's go ahead and move on to the last person, but they could have been number one on this list. Told a huge story about this guy because this was probably the worst that I ever got my ass kicked while locked up. And who that person is a guy nicknamed Tyson. Tyson is still locked up right now. He would end up going home and getting locked up again after me and Tyson got to fighting. But, real quick, before I go any further, if you don't know this story, you don't ever mess with a guy nicknamed Tyson. Probably got that name for a reason, and we ain't talking about the chicken brand neither. Tyson was this, pretty decently shaped, but smaller than me dude, who I was really good friends with in the jail. We were both young I think we're like very close in age. I'm 38, Tyson is 41. I only know that because I just looked him up to see where he was at. He's still locked up. So he was only a couple of years older than me. Everybody knew this dude. They knew his reputation. They knew he could fight. And I didn't care about none of that because I was a little young whippersnapper, little pistol starter in the street, thug life for life, Joe. So as cool as we were, we worked on Trustee together. And we got to arguing one day, and I used to make fun of him for the way that he talked. He had not a very boastful voice. He was very timid, I guess is a good way to put it. Which, don't ever judge nobody based on the size of their voice. Because the biggest voices are going to get knocked down the fastest. And that was how it went in my particular case. I called this dude Tyson out because we were laughing and joking, and it's something you shouldn't do while locked up because that can go too far. People can catch feelings. I caught feelings. Tyson said something about something that made me mad. I said something about something that made him mad. I said, yo, why don't you come see me in the cooler? Tyson followed me into that cooler. We got these rain boots on. The floor is super slippery, whatever. Tyson kept saying, just shut the cooler door, Joe. Just shut the cooler door. I shut the cooler door. I turned away to shut the cooler door. And as soon as I turned back around, boom, I ate that haymaker right in the jaw. Shit floored me. I'm slipping and sliding. I lost my balance. I got sucker punched by Tyson, who then proceeded to make it rain with those haymakers on my head. Bing, 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 bing. I thought I was going to die back there. I'm not going to lie. Knocked me out, briefly, and I came back to still getting hit. And then he finally stopped, and I was messed up. So messed up. We went back out there. I'm dazed and confused as all get out. And I'm trying to make the trays. My head is knotting up. My eyes are swollen shut. My lips busted. Nose busted. Didn't get my nose broke or nothing. Didn't even get a hit in. When I shared this story before, everybody was like, oh, Joe, what could you do? You got sucker punched. And that's true. But there ain't no rules in fighting when you're locked up. I mean, you ought to know that. That fact eluded me at the time. Ironically, I would be able to finish my shift, get shook down, make it back to the cell block without any guards being any wiser. My head held low. Count time, my head held low. Hiding my face, trying not to show my wounds, and I'm super embarrassed, so I'm over there moping and being by myself. I just got my ass kicked. I can't do shit about it. I got no wins against a dude nicknamed Tyson. And then eventually, within about 2 or 3 days, I would get called out into the hallway to go talk to a guard. And I don't know if it was because the guard saw my face, which that is a possibility, but I'm pretty sure it was they were brought up to speed because somebody had told. Now, why would somebody tell who had nothing to do with this fight, but they would? So I'm sitting out in the hallway and the guard's like, yo, what happened to you? And I was like, I fell down the stairs. The guard said, there ain't no stairs, it's an elevator. And I said, well, you know, I just fell, I got hit playing basketball. Whatever the case may be, the guard said, I know you got beat up, and if you're scared, you can tell me who it is. You know, we'll get you out of here. I said, I don't know what you're talking about, officer. I'm TTG for life, even though I still got a concussion. I would end up getting sent to the hole regardless. And crazy enough, it was during that time when I was in the hole that I got the letter from Punk Tattoo Guy. But more crazy is the fact that an hour later, 20 minutes later, here comes Tyson up in there, and Tyson is pissed. Tyson's like, yo, Joe, you told the people. Hey, Joe, you told. And I'm like, I just got my ass kicked. I'm going to wear another ass kicking because even though I didn't tell, it damn sure looks like I did because Tyson came out right after me. Now you're probably wondering, oh, Joe, you definitely told. Like I said, I didn't. I was about that street cred, that street life. Had I ever been a snitch, I'd have never done the 7 years that I did. But somebody did tell on us. They said that, a couple of days ago, Tyson and Joe got to fighting Jay Smooth got to fighting down in the cooler. You need to look at this guy. He probably needs a doctor. Now, the motive for this was the fact that me and Tyson worked on the line crew. Now, again, there's levels to this kitchen shit. And the line is only one step above putting food on the trays, one step above the worst job in the kitchen, which is the tray room. When you're working in that tray room, you ain't getting no extra food, you ain't eating too good. You might be eating some shit off of somebody's tray that's coming in there that you're supposed to bang out and wash. The tray room don't get no love. And the only way that you get out of the tray room is when somebody gets knocked off at a higher position and then the next guy moves up, the next guy moves up, you get to move up. But if ain't nobody leaving or moving, your ass is gonna be in that tray room for as long as it takes. So why not get two dudes up out of there? That way you got a chance of moving up. And unfortunately, in my case, that's exactly what happened. Now, what's crazy is I wouldn't see Tyson for the remainder of the time that we were locked up. We were probably arguing through the bars, me defending myself. Hey, look, Tyson, I didn't tell. Him telling me he's gonna whoop my ass when he gets a chance to see me again. Well, he didn't get a chance to see me again. I would end up going home. And I'm sure he would end up going home too. We would not see each other again, face-to-face confrontation, until a couple of years later, we were both locked up again, and we were in the gym. So if it was gonna go down, it could have gone down right then and there. Matter of fact, when I got moved out of isolation, they put me in one cell block down in the dungeon, and he was in the one right across the hall. I think that's how that shit went. And I'm pretty sure he was arguing with me through those bars as well. But anyways, a couple of years later, we run into each other again in the jail. And he's ready to fight me. And I'm like, Tyson, look, I'm gonna tell you right now, I didn't tell. And I broke down my philosophy on this, just like I broke it down to you guys. And whether he believed it or not, I guess it was enough for him to just say it probably ain't worth it to do anything. I mean, okay, whatever. That is a plausible thing that could have happened. It doesn't mean that I believe you, but it did spare me from another ass whooping. So even though I might have been a horrible criminal in my life, I probably could have made for a decent attorney because I got me a nice argument when it comes to, Your Honor, I can explain, or something like that. Hey, look, that's it. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did so, please leave a like and a comment on this, letting me know exactly what you thought about this. Who was your favorite person that I shared about in this video? And as always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day. Peace!